Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is episode 194, season 4, episode 34. We begin the fourth book of the five books of Moses. Once again, the book known as the Book of Numbers. Our portion of the week is the portion known as Bamidbar. Our focus of the week is actually going to be on the holiday upcoming of what's called in Hebrew Shavuot. In English, it's called Pentecost. It's the celebration of the giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. And our topic of the week is, that was a lot of mouthful right there, is what I'm calling on Ruthian leadership, focusing in on some of the lessons from the Book of Ruth. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a great week. Let's start, as always, with our win of the week and our learning of the week, because I think those things are super important always. It's really important to reflect on these things, really important to take our time and give ourselves the opportunity to reflect on all the things that are good in our life and the things that we're learning so that we're always growing at every moment. Okay, so the win of the week, it's a couple things. One, let's start at the beginning. There was actually a couple of wins this week, so really let's sort of dive into those. First win of the week was simply just my birthday this week. I turned 49, so I now have completed 49 years, which puts me in my Jubilee year. And that is something I want to explore and figure out what are the great things I want to accomplish in this 50th year of my life. So I'm super appreciative for that. And as a way in which we celebrated as a family, which is another win, to celebrate together, everyone. Doesn't happen often enough that we're all together in the same room, other than on a Sabbath. But we had the opportunity last night to celebrate my birthday in a certain and unique way by participating and taking a cooking class. It was what's called a carnivore's cooking class. You can imagine what was on the menu. It was a lot of meat, and it was a lot of fun. And so that was a great way to get together to celebrate, a different, unique way than normal. Typically speaking, it's simply a dinner or something of that nature. But this was a really good way to win. And my third win of the week was a horrifyingly brutal 10K run early this morning. I know I've been chronicling my runs here on the podcast. So today was my first 10K. I can't say that I ran 10K. I participated in 10 kilometers worth of work this morning, and I somehow got through it. I ran for a good portion of it. I ran well at the end of it, which I was shocked by. But overall, it was not something for the record books. Simply other than the fact that it happened. Okay, so those are my winnings of the week. A lot of wins this week, thankfully. Super appreciative and grateful for that. Learning of the week, I think, is also an important one. We attended this week an important ceremony for our older son in completing a portion of his service to the country here. And I was sort of sitting there reflecting on the fact that in a moment like that we had done well, feel like we had done well by him and by all of our children. Really very much putting them focused and center their needs, their success, and hoping to create opportunities and moments for them to really succeed in everything that they want to do and everything that they want to put out into the world. And seeing him there in that moment and seeing our other children there celebrating him, but also simply just for myself celebrating all of them, because I really feel like they've all accomplished a tremendous amount already at such a young age, that feel like we've done well by them. So kudos to them, kudos to my wife, Naomi, who you've met a couple of times, quote unquote, in the podcast for other things that I've mentioned about her, because I do feel like that's good, and it's worth sort of taking a minute to be proud, and you can have pride in those kinds of things, I really think. And so I do, and I don't always think about it, but it was an opportunity to think about it. Okay, so here we go. Topic of the week is Ruthian leadership. The Book of Ruth is not viewed as a leadership book. By the way, parenthetically speaking, just at the outset, if you don't have time today to listen, that's fine, no problem. Because it's related to the holiday upcoming next week, you have the opportunity to use this as a subject for discussion and conversation at other places, or simply just listen later on as you have the time early next week. So the Book of Ruth itself is viewed, I think, for the most part, as not a leadership book. I would say that very plainly and clearly and obviously. For the most part, why it's read at this time of the year, why it's read on the holiday, one has to do somewhat with lineage, the idea of the lineage of David and his connection to that date, because in our tradition, David is born on the holiday of the Pentecost, on the holiday of Shavuot. That's one. Two, there is a notion, an idea about sort of the oral law coming into play in that book. Three, it's very much a book about righteousness, kindness, and goodness taking place in the land. And those things are very powerful and very transformative. Let's use that term. But I would say that something that we've talked about here before, and it's a conversation I've mentioned before that I had years ago with one of my brothers on what's basically called the curse of knowledge. There's an assumed level of knowledge, or there is a level of knowledge, and by virtue of the fact that we have a level of knowledge, we are blinded occasionally by new ideas that are sort of in plain sight from the same text and the same materials. It's very hard for us to sort of step back, step out, and look at things differently with a clean lens or a different lens. And so there's that curse of knowledge that comes into play. You have it in a lot of walks of life. And here's another one. Because the book is so familiar to so many of us, we have a certain notion about what it's about. But the reality of it is, if you look carefully at the Book of Ruth is actually a leadership book. It's a leadership book in the small, but it's very much a leadership book. And I think there's something deep in the idea that on the holiday, on the celebrating, commemorating the giving of the Ten Commandments, effectively the celebration of the covenant between God and the people at Sinai, that there is a book that's read which is subtly and not so subtly about leading, because one of the things that we are commanded to do, expected to do in this world is to lead. And so the specific kind of leadership, and this came after having done a lot of the initial work on the different leadership personalities and the leadership principles that come from their personalities, is this idea of what's called transformative leadership. A few weeks ago, maybe more than a few weeks ago, we talked about conscious leadership. And here we're talking about transformative leadership. Now you might think that all leadership is transformative. It's not true. Most leadership is transactional. It's sort of very low on the spectrum in the sense that it's very focused on simply just success, mostly in the monetary sense, right? Did we sell more widgets? Did we make more money? It's very transactional. And so you're looking at the person who's the leader and the leader's looking down at you. Are we getting more transactions done? Are we looking in that space? Transformative is much higher and is much more ideal based. And maybe it's something that we should strive to or look to bring into our being, into our worlds as a form and format of leadership. So transformative leadership as a concept was defined in the book called Transformational Leadership by Bernard Bass and Ronald Riggio. And it was the following. Transformative leadership is characterized by the ability to inspire and motivate followers to achieve extraordinary outcomes, and in the process, develop their own leadership capacity. Meaning a key component here is the extraordinary outcomes, but also the person developing themselves as a leader. So it's not just being led, but it's becoming a leader as well. So this type of leadership integrates a compelling vision, steadfast integrity, guiding individuals and organizations through change and challenges towards a more positive future. So we do not only seek to accomplish and achieve organizational goals, but also to elevate the moral and ethical standards within the organization. That's how they define it. And in reading about it at a deeper level, it's basically from them defined in four specific ways. One is idealized influence. So the current leader is modeling a certain structure, a certain behavior set, a certain manner of being to earn the admiration, trust, and the respect of their followers by exhibiting this very high standard of behavior and conduct. Two, then, they're also inspiring towards motivation. So the leaders are articulating a compelling vision that inspires and motivates the followers towards the higher goals. You can see why people would want to participate and be part of that kind of a situation. Three, there's an intellectual stimulation component. Leaders are encouraging creativity and innovation by challenging the assumptions and soliciting followers' ideas and perspectives. So they're bringing people into it. By virtue of bringing them into the conversation, they're helping them lead more and lead better. And 4, there's an individualized consideration. Leaders provide personalized support and mentorship, recognizing and addressing the individual's needs and aspirations, right? So there's like a very different kind of vibe around that term, I'll say, of transformative or transformational leadership as opposed to transactional leadership, as opposed to other kinds of leadership. It's very much focused not just on the person who's the leader, but those at the moment who are being led. It's an important sort of piece of the puzzle. So it's important because when leaders operate in this way and they embody this kind of vision and integrity and proactivity towards other people, then they can help their teams really navigate through all kinds of uncertainty, difficulty, stress, pressure, anxiety, but at the same time, drive towards meaningful and successful, sustainable success and outcomes. And so when we think about it in the context of the Book of Ruth, and again, the challenge is to try to find a way in which the Book of Ruth isn't just simply a nice story to read or something to remember each year, but it's impactful on us as beings. So again, the focus on good behavior, on kindness and righteousness, and maybe beyond the letter of the law level of kindness and goodness, I think that's very important. But here I think there's another aspect to it as well. So you'll see when you go into the characters in the book, leaders who led and leaders who failed, leaders who met the moment and leaders who missed the moment. And by virtue of operating in those spaces, you learn a lot about leadership. Again, it's important to appreciate that much of what's going on is happening in the small. It's a very important piece to appreciate the context within which a person is leading. And so in the book, when you have Boaz is a leader communally, but he's not a national leader per se, at least according to the text that's in front of you. And his relationship to Ruth and Naomi are personal. And so the fact that it later leads to the birth of David a few generations down, so then it has national implications. But in the moment, it has very personal and localized implications. And it's important to appreciate then the idea that transformational leadership or transformative leadership has to happen at every level, and it has to happen in the small. And when it operates and it happens in the small, it can actually then, sort of roll into happening in the big. So here, let's take a couple of ideas from different individuals. So first of all, let's take the negative side. Right? The negative side is those who miss their opportunities. And so there are 5 players of people in the book of Ruth who missed their opportunity. Right? So you have Elimelech, who's the husband of Naomi at the beginning of the book. You have their sons, Machlon and Chilion, who are married to Ruth and Orpah. Those are 3. Orpah misses an opportunity. And then last is a gentleman by the name of, he goes by the name of Ploni Almoni, which basically means person with no name. And those 5 people miss their opportunities to lead in the book. And so Elimelech is, in deciding to move his family to Moab in response to the famine right at the outset of the book, is a reactive measure. And instead of being proactive as a leader, because he is effectively a leader in the community, he leads by not leading. He leads by leaving. He leads by going away from the situation and leaving everybody in the sticks. And so operating in that way is a missed opportunity. If he stays and he pushes through, maybe there's an opportunity to do something great for his people, for his community. His sons, the same thing. We don't know very much about them other than the fact that they move, that they marry Moabite women, and that they die. They're passive side stories to the story, and they're not proactively or demonstrably engaged in any sort of role in the community. They move, they leave with their father. And so it's ironic in some level that their role here is a missed opportunity as the foil to Naomi later on, because at the beginning she's not a great leader, to Ruth and to Boaz later on. And Orpah, as the last one, is a person who missed opportunity by the path of least resistance. She doesn't take any sort of opportunity whatsoever. She simply just goes home when she makes a decision. Decision making, super interesting, super important. I would love to deep dive into her decision making. But by simply going back and not taking the difficult road, not seeking the obstacles, not going through what's going to be very hard for Ruth, Orpah takes that path of least resistance and doesn't do anything. And the last one, Ploni Almoni, this gentleman, by not engaging in the opportunity to inherit and then to marry Ruth, again, same idea, path of least resistance, which is why he's ultimately known by not being known whatsoever. He has no name. And so it's important to appreciate and to take the opportunity when looking at the story at the people who missed opportunities to leave. But on the flip, on the positive side, let's start with the power of vision. Very key to transformational leadership is the power of vision. It's such a much higher and much deeper, much further looking individual. It's what Simon Sinek has talked about, the idea of the why, that power of vision. By promoting an understanding of the why, of the vision of what it is we're trying to do, why it is that we're trying to do it, you can draw in and get attention from people who, typically speaking, might not pay attention. And so here is an example of someone like Naomi in the book who transforms. She moves with her husband and sons. It's not a good situation. It's a disaster, effectively, because they obviously leave. Her husband dies. Her sons die. She even changes her name to the name, basically calling herself Bitter. But as the story progresses, Naomi takes on a much deeper, much higher, much bigger vision by looking next generation to the future of Ruth. How is Ruth going to survive in this new environment? How is Ruth going to be successful in this world? And this takes on a very strategic role in promoting the opportunities for Ruth to ultimately to secure a future and to be successful, right? So that's a very powerful transformation. And her focus on Ruth specifically is that power of vision. That's number one. In a real world environment, again, you can think about either the startup leader, a person in their home. Despite difficulties and early setbacks, they maintain that clear, high vision for the company's mission, which can inspire and continue to draw people in who want to participate in. That's one. Number two would be sort of an integrity in that leadership. We talked at the beginning, by modeling a certain form of leadership, by being a certain way, you're able to then have influence and help to transform other people. So in that case, particularly Boaz in the book is exemplifying that integrity in leadership. He's a community leader. He has basically what it seems all he needs. He doesn't need to take something additional on. He doesn't need the quote unquote headache of Ruth. But when he sees the opportunity to redeem both Naomi's land and then to marry Ruth, he ensures that every action that needs to be taken is taken. And he conducts himself with an incredible level of respect towards both the customs of the community and the law of his people. He draws people into the conversation. He consults. He seeks out the local kinsmen for their opinions and for their ideas. And he has a very ethical approach to his decision-making process. John Cotter, in his work called Leading Change, emphasizes this critical role of what we'll call ethical leadership. That's what integrity is at its core, in navigating change and ensuring longer-term success. So imagine that in your own environments, again, home, community, work environment, ethical decision-making and leading with integrity is vital, fundamental, and crucial. And even when the decisions are difficult, by building trust and loyalty from the people that are around you within your organization, within your team, so then you're ensuring a longer-term success, you're ensuring partnerships, you're ensuring that people are going to help you get there, and obviously you're maintaining a very high level of the company's reputation. The third piece of this puzzle of transformational leadership would be the proactivity and strategic thinking, right? So we mentioned it before that Naomi has transformed on the level of going from being bitter to the person who is now focused on Ruth's future, right? Naomi's strategic thinking really shines through as she's advising Ruth how to glean from Boaz's field, how to behave, how later for Ruth to approach Boaz, how ultimately to orchestrate, for lack of a better term, the ultimate result, which is Ruth being in the home of Boaz, marrying Boaz, and setting that future in motion. Being proactive comes to us in the modern environment from Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The importance of being proactive and strategically focused and strategically thinking to achieve long-term big goals. In a crisis, if you have a sudden economic downturn, if something's not going well, whatever it is, the proactive leader who's always exploring new opportunities and new markets, new ways to partner, diversification, those are the ones who, by adapting, avoid failure, closure, disaster in their world. So that is very much, I think, super important. And the last one here is resilience and adaptability. You see how transformational leadership it's huge. It's a wide subject. There's no question about it. The last one here, of course, we cannot talk about the Book of Ruth without talking about Ruth. And so her resilience and ability to adapt allows her to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. Her journey from Moab to Bethlehem to Beit Lechem in Hebrew, and her willingness to adapt and be the person to go into the field, to lower herself to the degree by which it was necessary to go and glean in the fields, and in a position where she's an outsider, she's a foreigner, she's really not part of the community really at all, an incredible level of resilience and adaptability. So in another piece called The Leadership Challenge, so the authors there highlight the importance of resilience and adaptability in leadership, stressing that leaders must be able to navigate and go through and grow through the different challenges. And so think about that again in your own environment. So this is really the way forward in how you do this. Now, to integrate this and to bring this into your organization is a lot of the things that we've talked about before. So obviously, leading by example, getting people aligned around the values, making this a fundamental core value of what you're trying to do, sharing stories where you felt like you succeeded, sharing where you felt like you didn't succeed in those moments, really reviewing how the person led from a place of growth, not the place of sort of punishment and fear, but a place of positivity and growth. This is how you get to where it is. There's much more to discuss on the subject, including some really cool frameworks and templates that a person can really use to bring transformational leadership into their environment, into their world, into their success. But I would end then, though, with a quote, as always, from Seth Godin. Seth Godin is a world-famous leader and thinker in marketing. And if you know his book called Purple Cows, and some others. And here's his quote on transformational leadership. Transformational leaders don't start by denying the world around them. Instead, they describe a future they'd like to create. That is Coaching the Bible for this week. I do, as always, look forward to seeing you next week. Those of you celebrating the coming week, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. See you next week.